All right, it is time. Hello, welcome everyone. This is the last show and tell of this season, I guess is what we call it. We're getting ready to start preparing for our virtual conference that's going to be later this summer. And then we will start our show and tell series again in the fall. If you don't know who I am, my name is April Shepard. I am the chair-elect of Lilly. And if you're not familiar with Lilly, it stands for Lifelong Information Literacy. And we are an all-volunteer group of librarians and information professionals, so you do not have to be a librarian. And we work to promote lifelong information literacy. If you want to learn more about Lilly or presenting yourself in the fall or even next year, I'm going to put my email into the chat in just a moment. And before we begin, I just have a couple really quick housekeeping items. And because the biggest question is this recorded? Yes, we are recording. I will have this sent out by the end of the week, maybe even tomorrow, but don't hold me to that. And then I'm going to watch the chat for Jay so he doesn't have to pay that much attention to it, so he can focus on his presentation. So put in your questions. I will mark them down, and we'll make sure that when we have breaks for questions, that Jay will get to all of them. Now to our speaker. Jay Edwards is the circulation supervisor at the University of Oklahoma Libraries, and he is the improv director at the Medieval Fair of Norman. All you, Jay.
All right, thank you, April, and thank you, everybody, to come to see the last session for this season of Lilly, and I'm really honored to be part of the last session, even though I originally planned to do this 6 weeks ago. And it was going to be really fun because we were going to talk about play. And then the next session was going to be playing with Kahoot. And it was going to be really neat seeing these concepts put into action with Kahoot. Unfortunately, I came down with something. Importantly, it was not COVID, but I did come down with something, and it made it impossible for me to speak. I may or may not have picked it up from the Norman Medieval Fair, which was the weekend before my presentation. And I thought, oh, it would be fine. It's 3 days, 10-hour days outside. I'll recover by Wednesday. But unfortunately, I came down with something. So I am part of the Norman Medieval Fair. I'm the improv director there. And I'm also with the libraries. I got my MLIS just a couple years ago. And for so many years, my experience with the libraries and my experience with the improv were kind of separate. I kind of thought of improv as kind of my hobby and my time at the library as a job. But over the past few years, I've been kind of integrating improvisation. There's a question to...
Yeah, I was trying to interrupt you. You went into presenter mode, and we can see your notes now.
Oh, fun. Let's see if I can stop that sharing, share screen. How about that? Nope. How about share? There we go. What do you see now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So now you won't be able to see all the embarrassing notes that I had. So I've been thinking about how to integrate improv into libraries. There's been a lot of history about using improvisation to improve instruction, but I've been researching how to integrate play directly into information literacy. But before I dive into that, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities whose traditional, ancestral, and sovereign lands we live and work on today. Librarians have an important role in providing plentiful resources and education about America's rich indigenous heritage and the current contributions of tribal nations. And I know that I'm asking this of librarians, but if you do have money that you're thinking of donating, I would recommend donating to the First American Museum of Oklahoma. And if you're ever in the Oklahoma City Metro, consider paying them a visit. They have a fantastic facility, really interesting collections and events going on all year long. So nothing is going to give you imposter syndrome, much like doing research in a field where no one really knows how to define the thing that you're researching. there are probably as many definitions of play as there are people defining play. And the most broad definition of play is free movement within a rigid structure. So you can think of the play of a steering wheel. You can think of putting on a play where the structure is the script and the set, but the actors and the directors have freedom to interpret the play as they wish. And when we look at, what do we got here? There we go. When we think about playfulness, it is a predisposition to reframe a mundane situation as play. So you can be doing something as mundane as doing laundry, and if you have a playful attitude, you can think about that as some kind of play. Luciano Labate came up with a much more, I wouldn't say concise, but a much more people-centric and modular definition of play, where he says that play consists of an active rather than passive, spontaneous rather than demanded, guided, or requested, and voluntary rather than involuntary, involvement rather than uninvolvement, that is pleasurable and relatively prolonged. Now we can take that modular definition, break it up, and see how it fits into play and information literacy. What about information literacy is active, spontaneous, voluntary, involving, pleasurable, and relatively prolonged? And what can we do to make it more active, spontaneous, and so on? So information literacy is something that is active. When you are searching for resources, when you are evaluating resources, and when you're searching for resources, especially if you think about being on a catalog or on a database, you are manipulating the search results. You're using keywords and using synonyms to see if you get different results. You're manipulating filters to see what they do, and you're using advanced features, trying them out and seeing what they do. Information literacy can be spontaneous. It's based on an evolving information need. It's driven sometimes, hopefully, by curiosity. It's voluntary. And when we think about teaching information literacy, we talk a lot about self-motivation versus the imposed inquiry, where a professor might tell a student, this is your assignment, you need to find these kinds of materials. Now, how much of that is an extrinsic motivation, and how much of that is some kind of curiosity that is intrinsically driving them to find information? Whoops. Involvement. Let's see if I can. Where is my mouse? Okay. Involvement or engagement. So involvement is a little bit different from being active. Being active, you can think of doing something like running, where you are where you are moving, you are very active, but you're not necessarily aware of your environment. So involvement requires interacting, which is a two-way street where you are involved and you're aware of what's going on. You're also learning about the information environment as you are manipulating it. You're seeing what people are talking about this environment, the jargon that they're using, learning more vocabulary as you go along, and then responding to it. Information literacy can be pleasurable. When we're talking about curiosity, we can satisfy that curiosity. We can also think about how we can make searching for information as low stakes as possible, as low stress as possible, and diminishing this intimidation that someone might feel, that a learner might feel about using a database and looking for information. And of course, it is relatively prolonged. Information literacy, searching for information, is reiterative. You're not just going to find the information at the beginning of an assignment and then go write about it. Sometimes you're going to be writing about it, find out that you need more information and go back. And of course, it's nonlinear. Sometimes you're going to have searches that fail. You can take a few steps back and try another branch. Now, since I'm not in presenter mode, I haven't been able to see my notes, but we'll go ahead and move on. So if you could, in the chat, describe a time that you discovered something you weren't expecting while you were exploring. And you could have been exploring anything that involves information or a real location or a virtual location or exploring any other kind of information. And while you respond to that, I'm going to see if I can get control back from my computer. All right, I'm going to change something up with mine, and I'm going to probably lose internet connection. I'll be right back. All right, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Right, this real quick. And right now, teachable moment, I am playing with my computer to see if I can fix this. All right, April, what can you see?
Right now, I see you.
Just me.
Just you. Hey, you're now screen sharing, and I see your slides.
Cool. And you see the question?
It looks like says curiosity and exploration. There you go. Now I see the question.
Awesome. And what did we come up with?
All sorts of fun stuff. I just saw someone say walking with a toddler. YouTube rabbit holes.
And yeah, and we typically think of rabbit holes as kind of a negative thing, but sometimes they can be positive. If it's because of your curiosity, you are learning more about what you're curious about. Of course, we have to be a bit more aware that we're not putting blinders on about other areas. And of course, we're taking an eye on the time so that we go to bed on time. What else?
Let's see. We have encountered wildlife on walks, all sorts of wildlife. Anna discovered that her local park was a cemetery and went into a deep dive about cemeteries in her city.
Neat.
Research tangents about wild hippos in Colombia and drug lords. Geocaching. Grocery store experiences, just discovering something new in the store. Yeah, just being in a massive city and just randomly trying new restaurants, finding new authors, learning about AI, and finding a completely camouflaged caterpillar on their plants.
Wow, nice. And yeah, we can see like what kind of information we have access to when we kind of turn off this or turn on playfulness or turn off the more quote unquote adult seriousness. When we get more active, when we get more involved, when we kind of free ourselves from some of these shackles and we give ourselves room to explore. And so the place where I'm kind of going with this is from the ACRL framework. Now, if you're not familiar with the ACRL framework, go give it a glance. It's has a lot of really great ideas in it. And I am looking at specifically this last frame, searching as strategic exploration. And one of the dispositions that the ACRL has is to exhibit mental flexibility and creativity. So flexibility is the capacity to easily switch between approaches, trying new actions, behaviors, or thoughts, and being free from the established patterns. So when you're exploring, you're not just going to the store to buy the thing that you need. You're actually taking the time to look around, try new branches, and see what's out there. And seeing what else, if you have a goal, you can think about what else would satisfy that goal. Could we even alter or slightly diminish the end goal? And the learner is free to change their current strategy when the situation makes it clear that a strategy is not working. And creativity is the ability to generate novel or unique ideas, identify the novelty and utility of any ideas that you've generated. So unique here means according to the student's context. A learner may arrive at a revelation that a whole bunch of other people have already come up with before, but it's unique to them because it's an idea that's new to them, something that they have not noticed before. A lot of the things that you described discovering were already known by a lot of people. I have an example. I was once in Manitou Springs, which is a suburb of Colorado Springs, for an improv festival. And one evening, I just decided to, go out for a walk in the downtown of Manitou Springs. And I came across just this alleyway of arcade games. They were all outside, and it was just row upon row of old style, Pac-Man, Base Commander type arcade games just outside there. And there were dozens and dozens of these games. Apparently, it's a real place called Manitou Springs Penny Arcade. That's been there for generations, but it was new to me, and it was fantastic and mind-blowing. When we're talking about ideas, something that is unique to a student is something that they came up with themselves, and they did not read about it, learn about it. They're taking ideas that exist beforehand and putting them together. So the ACRL has also knowledge practices, ways of working out flexibility and creativity. The first way is divergent thinking, where you think of a quantity of ideas, the ability to come up with a lot of ideas quickly, a variety of ideas, how different the ideas are from each other, and the uniqueness of ideas, the idea's originality. And then the quote unquote opposite of that is convergent thinking. And this is analyzing and critically analyzing the ideas that you brainstormed, identifying patterns between the ideas, and then identifying possible solutions. Now, the popular conception of convergent thinking is eliminating ideas until all you have left are the best ones. So we did all of this work in divergent thinking, coming up with these ideas, and all we're going to do with them is get rid of most of them. And in searching, what this tends to mean is selecting a few resources, ignoring all the rest of them, and then you're done, and then you go write your paper. A more playful way of thinking about convergent thinking is thinking about how these ideas are related to each other. And real quick note, you've probably seen a version of this meme. I have done as much research as possible to figure out where this meme came from. And as far as anyone can tell, it was an anonymous artist and anonymous poster. But I modified it for my own purposes. So when we're searching for information, We can identify patterns. We can identify connections and relationships between ideas. We can learn what resources exist, learn the vocabulary and jargon, continually reflect on what our gaps in knowledge actually are, identify our interest and curiosity, and while we're doing all of this, select resources as we go and repeat, repeat, and repeat. So I have a little game that I want to try. And the first thing that I want to do is, in the chat, name a common topic you've seen first-year students choose for a composition paper. I'll see if I can get my chat up. I am. So, for example, we'll have, well, I want to go immigration. There we go. All right, and then April, you're my eyes and ears for now. So let me see. Go ahead and tell me what kinds of topics people are coming up with.
All right, so social media, a lot of things related to social media, mental health, social media, self-harm. The value of college education came up many, many times. So students are apparently very interested in that. Climate change, death penalty, air pollution, abortion, a whole lot about college athletes and should college athletes be paid. So that is a really big one on my campus too. Health things like preventing heart disease, vaping, internet addiction. There's also some social topics like feminism, LGBTQ topics.
Excellent. So step 2 of this game is going to be look at some of those topics in the chat and choose as randomly as possible 2 of them, and then post the 2 you chose in a new comment. All right, and I'll give you a few seconds to do that.
So we are getting mental health, depression, substance abuse, internet addiction, and feminism. Cheerleading as a sport and gun laws. I really love that mix. Nature and mental health, social media and mental health, feminism and vaping, gun laws and feminism, social media and paid athletes, social media and cheerleading as a sport, internet addiction and how to prevent heart disease, laws, global warming. So there's some really good, there's a whole bunch more.
So step 3 of this is is for you to reply to one of those combinations and combine them to make a new topic for that you might write for a composition paper. So for example, in my example, I chose immigration and LGBTQ rights, and putting them together, we could talk about how LGBTQ people are treated in immigration camps, or we could talk about the experiences and contributions of someone who immigrated to this country and who is also part of the LGBTQ community. So go ahead and take a look at that, try to combine a few things, and then I'm going to get out of my display once again in order for me to look at the chat. If my computer's going to let me do that. Oh, there it is. Many screens.
So the first one is, as global warming worsens, violent crime tends to increase. Gun laws should become more restricted, and the likelihood that people will use them for violence.
And sorry, my brain is kind of, there I am.
Then combining the gun laws and abortions could become the number of people injured while attempting to enter abortion clinics.
Yeah, there's already been a history of violence connected to that. And what else?
Vaping and cheerleading could be, does vaping affect sport performance in cheerleading? Or does cheerleading vaping's impact ability to compete? Yeah,
we have, here at the Fine Arts Library, we have an entire section on like dance-related medical issues. And that would be one interesting way of going about that. What else?
global and warming and social media could become social media organizing and global warming advocacy work, or the opposite, does global warming encourage people to take action or not, or social media to encourage people to take action or not?
These are all, like, I would want to read these topics. Like, what about you, April?
Oh yeah, but I'm very
and like,
too.
how many, and I know that we're primarily librarians, and so we're probably not reading the papers that these professors are reading, but how many repetitive papers on abortion or immigration or climate change have they read? And we're coming up with really interesting things that I'm sure someone's written about this somewhere, but it's going to be really unique to that student and probably to the professor who is charged with reading their papers. So let me get back, learning how my computer works by playing with it. So
I actually had a professor in college who had a list of banned topics because he was so tired of reading papers.
So, and what are you seeing now?
I see your slide.
My slide. So, and so what we just did was one kind of method of divergent thinking, coming up with a whole lot of ideas, and then convergent thinking, seeing, not just eliminating them, but seeing how they are related and seeing what new ideas emerge from them. So that is a playful way of basic topic creation. So now how do we think about having students learn how to be playful when searching and when creating topics? And I just saw the question whether the slides will be posted. I will work with April to post those as well. So the basic definition of a game is a structured form of play. If we thought back to the definition of play being the freedom within a structure, a game is a specific kind of structure that allows specifically for play, giving people permission, so to say, in order to play. And then gamification, the official definition going around is applying aspects of a game to other areas of life. And so we've seen a lot of literature about, for example, putting a scoring point system to a class, which seems kind of redundant because we already give a point system per class. If you get more than 90 points, you get an A, and so forth. But we can also think of gamification at just kind of like we saw about playfulness, of reframing a mundane situation as a game. Now, looking around, doing my own research on trying to see what kind of patterns of games have been introduced in libraries, I found no pattern, unfortunately. Or rather, I should say, the pattern that I saw is that librarians, such as the ones that you see on your screen, right, April? Awesome. Thank you. They tend to generate their own games. They start taking aspects of games and mixing them together to make a game that makes sense for them in their classes, in their sessions, in their workshops, in order for them to achieve their goals. So what are the aspects of a game? The primary aspect is going to be some kind of goal or an end state, also called a win state, if you decide that someone needs to win or someone needs to lose. And of course, that can be, does one person win and another person lose, or does the entire group win, or does the entire group lose? But some games do not have any kind of win state. They might have an end state, like how much time we put in it. If it's a song game, the game ends when the song ends. And there is no winner or loser. It's just the experience and the process of having played the game. Next are game mechanics. how do the players get to that goal? What do they do to move themselves along? And then materials. What do the players use to move through the game mechanics toward the goals or the end state? Some games have narrative style and themes, which is not unique to a game. This can be movies, books, and all sorts of things. And of course, you'll have a briefing, how to play the game, and then some kind of debriefing. You may talk about what the experience was like of the game, and then we can assess how the game works. When we're creating an educational game, we won't just think about the goal and end statement of the game. We're also thinking about what we want the learners to learn. And then the game mechanics will have written, we can write out rules, we can use a script. We don't have to use a script. You can say it, but it'll be the same thing you say every time. With materials, we're going to, let me move this. We're going to have constraints. We're going to have some materials that are going to be available and some that are not. Constraints can also be what kind of time limit do we have? How many players is a game going to have, and so on. There's also, we will need to think about whether narrative style and theme are even necessary. Do you need an elaborate artifice when simple mechanics will do? And then you'll want to prototype and play test to make sure that the mechanics are doing what you want them to do. Are the learners actually learning what your objectives, or are they bogged down in learning what the game actually is doing? So there is a long gradient of games that have high structure and low structure. I'm pretty sure that many of us remember the escape room fad that was in its heyday right before the pandemic. Society collapsed and not many people do them much anymore. But there were some libraries that tried to use escape rooms as a game to meet an objective where they utilize information literacy skills to find the specific information they need to escape the room. The mechanics have various puzzles and clues that they have to work through. And then, of course, the materials were plentiful. You don't necessarily have to use a room. I have seen some people using an escape box. And there are some board games that utilize these mechanics, but it's just a simple board game. But you may have to also limit your participants, and of course you have a time limit. They have to escape within a certain hour or during a certain session. Another limit that escape room would have, especially when we're thinking about information literacy skills, is that an escape room has to use closed questions. You're going to have to find the code to get out of the room or to open the box, and you can use static information like what time is the library open? How many books can someone check out? What is the call number for Katie Mack's book on astronomy? So you're not going to get open questions like, what are you curious about? How would you search for information? You do get some play because you are putting together information in different ways to see what works. On the low structure side, we have something like Think, Pair, Share. And Think, Pair, Share is a pedagogical tool used to guide a discussion that can be about any topics. And the mechanic there, if we think about these, if we reframe them as mechanics, the first game mechanic is to think, consider, or write your answer individually to a prompt that we gave you. The second round is a pair where you discuss your thoughts with another person. And then the third round is to share your information voluntarily as an entire group. The benefit of this is that there are no materials necessary. You may have stuff that you need for notes. You may be doing it on Zoom. And you can use open questions. But it's, on the other hand, it's very, very simple, not much narrative or style. And then it's going to be something that many, many students have already experienced before, so it's not going to be as novel or unique. One game that I would say next in 2 weeks go see, but it's already happened in the past. There is a recording of it. It's not going to be as fun watching the recording because we actually got to play Kahoot. But the goal for that was to reinforce information we learned earlier. And the way we did that was to collect the most points. We played a trivia game and points awarded, and whoever got the most points was the winner. And then you need a Kahoot account. Everyone would need a device in order to access the internet. And then again, it would only require closed questions. There wasn't a lot of long answer or reflection involved. One game that I really wish that I had made up was made by Sarah Kahn and Gina Levitin, called Research Roulette. If you have a class that needs to learn how to search a database, we can use this game. The mechanics for this is that one person will be on a laptop and they will search for the topic that they are researching. Then they're going to take that laptop and pass it to the right. The next person is going to look at the question that or look at the search term that they just asked, and they will add a second term. In improv vernacular, they are saying yes to the previous search term, and they're saying and they will add a second search term. Then pass the laptop to the right. The third person is going to add some kind of filter, either a subject heading, date that it was created, whether it's peer reviewed or not. And then they're going to pass the laptop back to the original person, and then we'll open it up to the room and we'll discuss the results. And inevitably, if you have a classroom of about 20 people, there will be at least one person who found material that they'll be able to use in their paper. And we can discuss how it was good for someone else with another perspective to add their 2 cents to what they're thinking about. There'll be another person who might have found absolutely nothing. The search results were absolute junk, in which case we can talk about how searching is iterative and nonlinear. Sometimes we're going to have to walk back, go back a couple of steps, and then try a different direction. And there's someone who found something that can't use in this topic, but something that is really interesting that they'll think about later. For materials, obviously, everybody needs a device with access to a catalog or database. You need 3 or more person per group. It takes about 5 minutes just to do the initial game, and then however much you want to work with. And then it really works well if you happen to have a class with a known research assignment. If you have some class, we do a lot of one-shots with a first-year student group where they typically don't have an assignment. I like to play this game where I demonstrate a database by taking suggestions. And I do pretty much what we did earlier, where we'll take 2 suggestions from students. Typically, I'll ask for what class were you at just before you came to this class? And these are first-year students, so they'll be in gen ed classes. So I got one that was like nutrition and geography. And so I searched for those as keywords, nutrition and geography. And the results that we got, we explored, we were using Academic Search Complete. We explored the topics, and we saw a lot of paper about, the question of where does your food come from, the evolution of certain food, and that's why they go into certain cuisines in different nations, and so on. I narrate as I go, so I can point out some things like filters and how to access this information and hit the key talking points that we want. Exploit teachable moments. I did get one person had a class that was management of informational technologies. That was the word he used, informational technologies. The results were bad. It was super technical and super jargony. And I said, what would happen if we took informational and used the more popular information technology? Suddenly, the search results were much better. Of course, the materials is better than the last game. You only need one device, your own computer, a display, one instructor, and any number of an audience. And it could happen with any class, but it's really good with if your class does not have an assignment coming up. So thinking back to the aspects of a game, I want to play another little game real quick. First, let's put in the chat, what are some learning objectives that you regularly try to get library users to understand? And let's go ahead and put those in the chat. What is a scholarly article? I can see the chat, by the way, and manipulate the chat. I fixed my computer.
Hey.
By randomly poking things. Nice. Research is a problem, not a destination. Evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. Dynamic research. Developing effective search strategies. And yeah, that frame searching is strategic evaluation. That's doing so much heavy lifting that we're using strategies such as using filters, such as Boolean searching, even little things like putting quotes around certain phrases. And so we're using structure to search for information, but it's also exploration. So we have our plans, but eventually our plans is going to fail, and then we're going to have to explore. Excellent. So now that we have, now that we brainstormed a lot of learning objectives, let's think about constraints. What kinds of constraints may limit a game? Time. And money. Access to technology. Motivation, nice. People involved. Ooh, professors' expectations, yes. Whether the topic is relevant to students, oh, hybrid classes, that is difficult. You have to intentionally think about that. Room size, grade, student levels, and then I'll also add, I'm not sure if I've seen it up there, accessibility. Not just access to technology, but whether students can move around a space if you need them to move around a space, whether they can see, whether they can hear, any learning disabilities. We want to be able to, it's really hard to make a universally accessible game. There is a movement in some games to make things where the colors are usable to someone with a color blindness and so on. So excellent. So now, third round, and this is the last round before we move on. What are individual game mechanics of games that you know? Dice rolling. Oh, and April, I'm doing your job. You can shout any interesting stuff that you can see.
Oh, I was enjoying the break.
Oh, good. Deck building, beating the clock, puzzle solving, drawing. Ooh, drawing. Ooh, Drawful. I like Drawful. I forgot about that game. Resource management. Excellent. Ooh, staying in character. That's from improv. Timing, strategy, trivia, and yeah. And so go ahead and keep those coming. So now that we've brainstormed learning objective constraints and game mechanics, laughter as a game mechanic. That sounds interesting. We'll think about that later. What I'd like you to do now is go review all the learning objectives, the constraints, and game mechanics that people have listed, and then let's put them together. Which ones look like they might work with each other? What learning objective seems to fit with what game mechanic? And I'll go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, research as process and teamwork.
Ooh, I just saw source evaluation and consensus building. And I think consensus building, if I'm right, that comes from like Secret Hitler and Avalon. So we could have like, ooh, everyone could have an article and one of them is fake. And then they'll have to reach a consensus and try to convince each other that the one fake article is the real one and not. Once again, prototyping and playtesting, but that's just a brainstorm thing. So what else do we have?
Deck building to build a search string.
Nice.
Resource selection and dice rolling. Keywords and deck building.
Mm-hmm.
Explanation and instructions, time with strategy and teamwork.
Good.
And Sam really wants to work on this game idea now.
Yeah. You are welcome. Maybe credit me.
Narrowing a topic plus time constraints plus make it a beat the clock game.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Like, how can we get from climate change to something that you can actually, yeah.
Narrowing topics and while drawing on a Jamboard. Whose article is best evaluation plus time constraints?
Nice. So I'm not familiar with Jamboard, but I assume it's drawing, right?
Yeah.
Or like collaborative drawing. So
it's like a virtual whiteboard-ish.
Motivations for evaluating sources and resource management. Interesting.
So I have a game I play with my students. They got to come up with the most off the wall topic they can that actually gets results and the best bonus points.
Neat. What was one of the last ones they came up with?
Oh, I'd have to look. They're always like the most insane thing. I think it had to do with My Little Ponies and male friendships or something. And then one person did something on the nutritional factors of deer meat sausage.
Okay.
You never know.
Yeah. And yes, bronies. So, and yeah, I have two nephews, and they would spend a lot of time on YouTube with parental supervision, and they would not watch My Little Pony. They would watch people reacting to My Little Pony. And like, they wouldn't play video games. They would watch people playing video games. So excellent. So it looks like we got a lot of neat ideas. And then, yeah, as I said before, if you liked my idea, you can run with it. sometimes this is going to take a little bit of time and effort. And then different people can go in different directions and see which one works. So of course, following up, you're going to want to think about whether you want narrative style and theme and then what they are. Actually think about the rules, writing them down, figuring out how you would tell people about these, and then actually try them out, play them and play testing and figure out what works, what doesn't. And then ongoing assessment. You can play a game with a class for several years and then realize something's not working, something might have changed culturally, and then update it as you go. For some resources, a lot of the, especially building games, came from a book by Andrew Walsh, the librarian's book on teaching the games and play. Also, there's Luciano's debate on play throughout the life cycle. And then there's a relatively new journal called the Journal of Play and Adulthood. In my wordplay, word and or not play article, I go through the ACRL framework, specifically the searching and strategic exploration frame, and teasing out where playfulness is in there. And then the research roulette game came from that article. It's all improv to me. All right, and so here is my information. Let me know if you try out one of these games and it works. Let me know. I like to hear success stories. And then there I am on LinkedIn, and my information for the library that I work at, like the Fine Arts Library at OU. So, April, did we have any? Oh, are we stopping at 50 minutes or at the top of the hour?
Top of the hour.
Excellent. So we have some time for questions.
Early. So yeah. So we got a few. The first question is, do you make a distinction between gamification or game-based learning, or do you think it's a useful distinction to make?
That's an interesting question. So do I make a distinction between gamification and game-based learning? I mean, the first distinction I can think of is that gamification doesn't have to involve learning. You can make anything a game. So it can be anything from real life that you make just to pass the time. So that's the big difference I can think of there. It sounds like game-based learning is a lot more intentional and involving and time constraining, because you're specifically thinking about how to create a game, whereas gamification, like a full game, you're creating a full game for learning, whereas gamification, we can break games apart and then add some kind of game mechanic to what we're already doing. So it's really teasing out the aspects of a game and seeing and cannibalizing them for our pedagogical purposes. So what else?
All right. Kind of cover some of this, but I want to go ahead and ask it anyway. So how do you make a think, pair, share game?
So first of all, you think about your learning objectives, and then you're going to come up with some kind of prompt, kind of like the questions that I put down earlier, like when was a time when you experienced this? When was the time you followed your curiosity somewhere? Or it could be anything random. Something I heard yesterday in another workshop was, how does a piece of 19th century literature, whatever 19th century literature you're reading, relate to being a teenager in 2022? So random prompts like that. And then you'll give the students that prompt and then explain to them, let's take, say, 30 seconds for you to decide how would you respond to that question. Then after a while, I'll have them, and you can use the mechanic like turn to your neighbor or get into groups of 2 or 3. They'll move into those groups, and then I'll have them share what their responses were for a couple of seconds, and then we'll open it up for a full discussion. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Excellent.
Okay,
Of
this one,
course, it's up to the person who asked the question whether it answers the question.
that is true.
So, all right,
I'm
what else?
not seeing unhappy faces in the chat, so I think it's good.
Mhm.
This is a two-part question. How do
Okay.
you include play in information literacy instruction in a way that doesn't feel forced, particularly online? And do you have any other specific tips for including play?
Yeah, I think it starts with your own personality. Being kind of a playful person is going to make things, if you're naturally playful, including play in information literacy is, or in a, including play in a session is going to be a bit more natural. One reason I use that game where I take suggestions is that I'm kind of integrating that playfulness in what I'm already doing. And yeah, so much of what we have to do online is, I mean, you're working with an artifice, and so you have to be artificial sometimes. There are games that work in person that absolutely don't online. And especially with, like, I've had issues with Zoom calls where I can't have everybody on mute and responding naturally to each other because you get a cacophony of sound. And so it's kind of really necessary to have those mechanics in where we decide who's talking and when. As for making them feel less forced, I think practice is probably the best way to make things feel less forced. And unfortunately, that's not going to help you at the very beginning because you have to do something more in order to get better at it. But the more efficient that you get at something, the less time that you have to think, the more time that you've internalized it, the more natural it's going to come off. And then what was the last part of that question? The tips?
Yeah, any other tips?
Any other tips? Have fun. And of course that you can't really force fun. It's going to have to come out naturally. But and fun can kind of be a method of assessment that if you're not having fun, and of course, if you're not learning anything, is there a way that you can learn something while having fun? Don't be afraid of jettisoning ideas. Ideas don't have feelings. So if something's not working, go ahead and jettison it. Also, Mandatory Fun is a Weird Al novel album.
So this is my question.
Yeah.
Do us, the librarians and instructors, do we benefit from play as much as the students do?
I think so. And I mean, I think about transferable skills a lot. As librarians, we're dealing with different kinds of information landscapes with, I can just think of all sorts of different internal databases like PeopleSoft that we have to deal with. Taking that information, taking that strategy and applying it to somewhere else works in almost any other part of a job, and so on. And then, yeah, I mean, if you're, I always like to think of myself as a lifelong learner, and part of being a lifelong learner, that's a tongue twister, is following your curiosity wherever it goes. Follow those rabbit holes, and as long as you can get out of them, it's a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So yeah.
I also think when you're having those interactions and when the students are engaged, it makes me engaged.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I like that every class is a little different. I don't know what topics are going to come up. So, you know, there's the skeleton of what I'm doing, but it's always different. So I'm not just rehashing the same monologue every time I'm in front of a group.
Yeah. Allison Hosier had a book called Added Context and Information Literacy. I don't have it written down, but one of the things she says at the beginning is that students typically come to a library session and they expect to be bored, right? And if that's our disposition, that we are boring, then we'll fulfill their expectations. But yeah, you're right. If we're engaging, then they'll be engaged.
Yeah, I had a student tell me last semester that she dreaded taking my 4-credit class because she knew it was going to be boring. And she said so far that was her favorite class she's had. So
Awesome.
Well, we are officially out of time. Thank you. We're getting lots of kudos, lots of praise in the chat. So I think people really enjoyed your section, Jay. So
well, thank you for saying good things to my face.
Well, happy to. And thank you.
And yes, thank you for letting me
session.
be the very last one.
Yeah.
So.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Awesome.
And Sam says they will cite you.
Good.